If you're like me and a lot of people that I talk to, you probably have a love-hate relationship with social media. We love connecting with interesting people and learning new things, but we hate the annoying people and wasting our time. Sound familiar? Personally, I choose to spend most of my time on social media on LinkedIn. LinkedIn used to be the online platform for job seekers, but nowadays it's more like the virtual water cooler conversation. Sure, it's focused on our careers and our professional life, but it's a lot more than just job seeking. It's learning, it's mentoring, it's connecting, and a lot more. Of course, there are those folks on LinkedIn who are constantly in sales mode, sending you direct messages to help you accelerate your sales funnel or gain 1 million followers. I also get a lot of pitches from people who want to be a guest on this podcast or who want to write a guest post on the TALKABOUTTALK.com website. Again, this is just about generating sales, and it's annoying. That all said, just about every single day, I read something that inspires me on LinkedIn. There are certain people who I follow who consistently add value to the platform. And one of these folks is the knowledgeable, generous, and entertaining Ron Tite, whom you're going to meet in just a few minutes. In my conversation with Ron, you're going to hear his advice for how to simplify your out-of-control brand strategy document. We also talk about how to apply his insights to your own personal brand. We cover the difference between self-awareness, honesty, transparency, and authenticity. We also cover insights about profanity. And yes, we talk about pitch slappers. Pitch slappers is the label that Ron Tite gave to those annoying folks on social media who politely request a connection and then, bam, they slap you with a pitch. He even created a segmentation scheme for them. There's the groper, the stumble upon, the smoke blower, the howdy partner, the mother or father, Teresa, the script follower, and of course, there's Robbie Random. It's all here in Ron Tite's book. And I love it.
Let's do this. Let's talk about talk.
Welcome to Talk About Talk podcast episode number 159. Think, do, say with Ron Tite. In case we haven't met, my name is Dr. Andrea Wojnicki, and I'm your executive communication coach. Please, just call me Andrea. I coach executives like you to improve your communication skills so you can communicate with confidence and ultimately you can achieve your career goals. You can learn more about what I do on the TALKABOUTTALK.com website. There are lots and lots of resources there for you. There's one-on-one coaching, boot camps, online courses, information about corporate workshops, and of course, the archive of this bi-weekly podcast. While you're on the website, I really hope you'll sign up for my bi-weekly email newsletter. That newsletter is your chance to get free communication coaching from me in your email inbox, plus some behind-the-scenes insights, information about the most recent podcast episodes, and upcoming programs. So please sign up for that newsletter. Okay, let's get into this. I'm sure you want to hear from Ron Tite. If you're a frequent listener of this Talk About Talk podcast, you probably know exactly how this is going to go. First, I'm going to introduce Ron, and then we're going to get right into the interview. Then at the end, I'm going to summarize with the top 3 learnings that I want to reinforce with you based on the interview. 3 things that I hope will help you in your quest for improved communication skills. Okay, now let me introduce Ron. As an entrepreneur, a speaker, and a best-selling author, Ron Tite has always blurred the lines between art and commerce. Ron is what you might call a Renaissance man. He's the founder and chief strategy and creative officer of an agency called Church and State, the host and executive producer of a hit podcast called The Coup, and executive producer of the Canadian Screen Award-nominated documentary film Freshwater. He has written for television. He's been a frequent guest on CTV, CBC, and Global News. And he was a judge on the CTV business reality show Dream Funded. He wrote and performed a hit play. He created a branded art gallery. He published an award-winning comedy book for the CBC. And for 5 years, he was the host and executive producer of the Canadian Comedy Award-nominated show Monkey Toast. If this sounds familiar to you, this was before the time a few years ago when I was a guest on Monkey Toast. Quite an experience, let me tell you, having improv actors on stage basically making fun of me. Anyway, Ron has a sense of humor. He's very clever. He's also in demand as a speaker all over the world. He speaks to leading organizations on topics such as creativity, disruption, leadership, and growth. He's also written a few books. In 2016, he co-authored his first book called Everyone's an Artist, or at least they should be. His second book is the one that I'm going to be talking about in this episode. Think, Do, Say. How to Seize Attention and Build Trust in a Busy, Busy World. Ron's third book, The Purpose of Purpose, will be released later this year. I can't wait to get my hands on that one. But now, let's listen to Ron's insights about thinking, doing, and saying. Thank you very much, Ron, for joining us here today to talk about think, do, and say.
Well, thanks, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start by having you describe what the main premise of your book is, which I've got sitting here right over my corner, or the corner of my shoulder.
Looks beautiful over
bookshelf.
there. It looks fantastic.
Yeah. Doesn't it look fantastic? It's actually always there. It's usually turned in, but
Yeah.
it's always there. It is. So why don't you describe what you mean by thinking, doing, and saying?
Well, this was in reaction to what I saw as business leaders overcomplicating their business. And we just went through, man, it was like, we need a mission, we need a vision, we need a North Star, we need a BHAG, we need a purpose. It was just getting endless. And I was going around and doing a ton of speeches, and I started to speak to frontline employees. And how do they kind of connect what the organization believes into their actions? Like, how do they contribute to the goals of the organization? They'd either go, I have no idea what a mission or vision is. I have no clue what that means and how it relates to my job. Or they would know it by heart.
Yeah.
They'd go, the mission of this organization is to, and they would spew it out because it was beat into their heads on onboarding day. But they, again, had no idea what it meant. Because business got so complicated that we needed a simplified operating system in order to kind of run and grow businesses. And I just think it was like, well, what's the simplest the operating system? And it is really that successful organizations can align what they fundamentally believe, the think part, what they do to reinforce that belief, the do part, and then how do they talk about it? And that when you look at, successful organizations, they're focused by a sense of purpose. They're focused by a sense of purpose. They're still defined by the actions that they take.
Yep.
And that when you look at growth, it happens really depending on how we talk about it, how we communicate it. And only then will people adopt our ideas and our passions.
So I'm imagining you running your agency and getting maybe a creative brief from a consumer packaged goods or some other organization, and it has all of these things in it that you were listing, right? Here's the vision of the brand, here's the mission, here's the personality, here's the values, and you're like, this is not helpful, right?
It's like, well, where do you focus? Which one do you? It's like that Spider-Man meme, of just like, what is it over here? What? And I just thought we needed to simplify it because the inputs to it can be really complicated. There's way more tools. The consumer journey is, way more complex than it ever has been before. The sales funnel is completely dead. It's now a sales cyclone. Like, there's all these things. And I just thought, like, those, and it's only going to grow. It's only going to become increasingly complicated.
Right.
So let's simplify the operating system that handles all those inputs.
So is it a sequence in that order? First you think, then you do, then you say?
Yes. It's really funny because, and I was very conscious about that. And the day the book launched, I think I was in Saskatoon or something. And I was I had a morning hit on like a morning show, a TV morning show.
Nice.
And the anchor said, he's the author of Think, Say, Do. And I thought, I can't correct him live on air. But everybody often will say he's the author of Think, Say, Do. They get it wrong because our mind, I think, naturally puts the promotion part before the action part. And I think that's wrong. I think we want to talk about it first and before we actually do it. And if we talk about something what we haven't done, even if it's aspirational, that has way less credibility than than stuff that is currently in place or actions that are currently taking place. So, yeah, so the do goes before the say. And you need to first figure out what you fundamentally believe in as an organization. And only then can you, should you focus the activities on reinforcing that purpose. And then, and only once it's done, should you be talking about it.
Okay. So you probably see this massive smile on my face, Ron.
Yeah.
I coach the topic that I coach executives on more than any other is actually their personal brand, which I say is synonymous in terms of their professional identity. So I'm not talking about turning people into social media influencers or monetizing their brand. I'm talking about them thinking deeply about who they are, what they care about, what their expertise and passions are, and then going out and communicating it. So I actually say explicitly, compared to other communication coaches, when you work with me, we're going to spend way more time on step one, which is creating or articulating the brand. And then step two, the communicating becomes so much easier.
Right.
And yeah. So I think that might be one of the reasons why your book resonated with me so much. So it's that plus the fact that you're really encouraging consistency, right?
This is a rapid head nod.
Yeah, I see a big smile there too. Yeah. Yeah. So you know what I say sometimes is garbage in, garbage out, quality in, quality out. And I don't understand. So I'm curious what other coaches personal branding coaches are coaching their folks on. And I see, so sign up and I'll teach you how to get 1,000 followers. All you need to do is fill in the blanks with these posts online and guaranteed. And I'm like, wait, what? How do they know what they're even talking about?
Yeah, my friend Warren Tomlin calls it random acts of digital.
Right.
It's just random, a bunch of random stuff.
Yeah.
When we work with brands and executives, and we use the book and the speech are what I, call that the kind of the corporate theater version of it. But when we get into, working with, big brands, it gets way more granular and kind of way more strategic. But it's the exact same operating system.
So have you ever thought about the analogy of taking your process that you take your clients through to a person? So
yeah,
service brands to people brands, right?
Oh yeah. We've worked with Olympians. Right now we're working with 2 executives. So sometimes the organization will go through a huge transformation. And we think that often, not always, but often the face of the company can be a separate independent marketing channel. That it can drive investor relations, it can drive internal alignment, it can drive, prospects and biz dev and things like that. And so, but we can't just have them kind of parroting, what the organizational beliefs are. So, as an example, I can't say the organization right yet because it's not live yet, but a large Canadian organization and who have fundamental beliefs about the category that they're in. Now, when we get to the CEO, what does she believe in? Well, we're articulating in the area of collaborative leadership. That how is the organization going to achieve this with various stakeholders? It's through collaborative leadership. And so that's what the person stands for. And that contributes to what the organizational goals are. But it's how she plays an individual role in it.
Interesting. I could go off on a tangent inquiring about collaborative leadership and what the difference is between that and servant leadership, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to ask you another question. With very many of my clients, when I'm coaching them on their personal brand, I ask them whether there's part of their identity that they know is unique about them that they end up trying to hide, especially in their job. Mm-hmm. And there's a quote in your book where you say, "It's not a bug, it's a feature." And when I read that, I was like, ding, 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 ding. So for example, I want to give you a couple of examples. One is, a common one is when people have an accent and they say to me, "Andrea, can you help me bury my accent? I don't want to have an accent anymore because I'm thought of as the foreigner." I'm like, hang on a second. The research says if I can understand you clearly, and I can, then I register for an accent, and then I just hear the content. Like it's insignificant. Secondly, this is your opportunity to provide evidence of something that actually is valuable, and that is your global experience, right? So you're not a foreigner, you're a lawyer with global experience, and they're thrilled with that. And the other example is a woman that I was coaching who's a senior partner at one of the big audit firms. And she said, well, I know what stands out about me is my sense of humor, and I really have to quash it. So I know we can also talk a lot about humor, because I think you have a great sense of humor. But I said to her, didn't you just get promoted? Yeah. Does your boss not know you have a sense of humor? Yeah. Do you think that your sense of humor was part of the reason you got promoted? She goes, I don't know. And I said, well, are you not the person in the room that brings levity to otherwise overly intense situations? She goes, well, yeah. And I said, and not to tell off-colored, inappropriate jokes, of course, even though that's what might be playing in the track in your head. And she said, okay. And I said, you need to lean into this as your superpower. It's not your main superpower, but it's one of them. And she felt this immense sense of relief. Can you comment on this whole thing? It's not a bug, it's a feature. I'm going to quote you on that. I love that.
Yeah, that was from a CEO who Chatham House rules were in effect, so I can't tell you who it was.
Okay.
But he is the global CEO of a global software company that we all know, and he's from the deep south in the U.S.
Okay. Oh.
And he was at before the software company. He was at a CPG who will go unnamed, and they sent him on a leadership development course when he hit VP. And he said, I quickly realized the sole purpose of the leadership development course was to get me to lose my Southern accent because they didn't feel I'd have credibility on the global stage. And that's when he said, and I quit. Because I realized it ain't a bug, it's a feature. And
I love it.
Yeah, it was amazing. But I think there's a couple of things with that. I think if you hide something from, well, I think we all have this like belief that we're supposed to look and act and sound like the stock photo version of whatever we think an executive in our field is supposed to look and act and sound like. Mm-hmm. And that's just bullshit. It is because when you do that, you kind of take on this mindset that, oh, this is what I'm supposed to say, and this is what I'm supposed to do. Yep. And you lose your authenticity, and you lose your uniqueness. And I think in the gut of the people that you're dealing with, they think if they're hiding the real you from me, like, what else are you hiding? Like, this is just some polished, scripted version of you, and I don't know what you're hiding there. And so that's the first thing, is I think authenticity helps to build trust. My definition of authenticity is just being comfortable with your supposed imperfections. Because that's what people buy. That's what they trust, and that's what they believe. Yep. The other side of it, though, is that when people go, what if I'm an a-hole? Like, am I supposed to lean into that authentic person? And so, yeah, there has to be a business model that supports your authentic self. So you can't just be who you are. But there's also, to the example that you talked about with the humor, the metaphor there is, if you're single and you're going on blind dates, well, you probably have a whole wardrobe of clothes. And if you find out you're going on a date with an investment banker, you probably go, you know what, I'm going to wear this suit. I'm going to wear this one. But if you have a date with a total tree hugger, then you probably have something else in your wardrobe where you're like, I'm going to wear this thing. This is what I'm going to wear for this. And so what you're doing is you're accessing different aspects of your personality. And all these things are all in your wardrobe. They're all a shade of yourself, but they're true and authentic. You already own them. Now, if you go out and buy something that you don't have to try and become something that you're not, then you can you feel it. It doesn't feel right, like everything. And you're never yourself. So to the people who are, the funny people, they're like, well, I'm funny, but I can't bring it to a meeting. Like, well, you probably don't bring it to a funeral, do you? No. Okay. So that's where there's kind of 0% humor is your funeral version of yourself. But to a baby shower, oh, you probably have a little bit of humor that shows up. And to a board meeting, there's probably a little bit there. And and you dial all the way up to sitting on a dock with a beer with your friends. So we're not all 100% humor, executive and 0% humor executive.
Yep.
We all have shades of those different personalities, and it's dialing them up and dialing them down to suit the situation that we're in.
I love that. Shades and dialing it up and dialing it down. I talk about filtering, right? So I say the F word of personal branding is filtering. You can't share every part of yourself with every single person that you meet. They'd think you were crazy. You couldn't show up wearing your entire wardrobe, right?
Right.
I like that analogy as well. It's beautiful.
It's funny because one of the first things I do in speeches, usually they're always different, but I'll usually talk about my kids within the first 3 minutes and make a joke about, like, I'm 53 and I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. And right away, it takes the script of the speaker that they've heard 4 million times and removes it.
Yeah.
And it just shows the human who's before them, opposed to just the speaker.
There's something about talking about our family, isn't there?
Yeah. I think so.
For me, I have 3 ginormous children. My sons are 6'7" and 6'8", and my daughter.
No.
Yeah. And people go, oh, how do you feed them? I'm like, oh, let me talk to you about like inventory in the refrigerator. It's ridiculous.
Wow. Oh yeah, they would tower over me.
Yeah. And I buy like 2 bunches of bananas, and then I get up in the morning, they're all gone. All of them. I'm like, anyway. Yeah, there's something about talking about your family though that just, okay, I saw a little glimpse into your life, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So you mentioned authenticity. This is another topic that I'm often questioned about, that I have a lot of thoughts about. During and after the pandemic, there was a common headline or question, I guess. Should we share our whole selves at work? Yes or no? And I was like, we should never share our whole selves. People would think we're crazy, right? And then I was like, if you're talking, and also what's the difference between authenticity and transparency? Because a lot of people think being transparent and being authentic means sharing everything. Like every part of your personal life, like the bad stuff your kids did, or the thing that you're not proud of, or whatever, right? Can you talk about that a little bit and relate it back also to product brands?
Yeah. I love that insight of that, because there are a lot of people who I'm going to overshare because that's being transparent. It's like, I don't think we need to know everything, especially if it doesn't contribute to the positioning of the brand, be it personal or organizational. Then I don't think you want to talk about your failures. Now, I think saying and being honest and saying, of course, I've had stuff that hasn't gone the way I thought it was going to go. Of course I have. But that doesn't mean we have to get up every single day and share every single detail of what went wrong that day and where we let ourselves down and everything. I don't think we need to share that, because what I find is that then that just becomes the stuff that people share. That's the only thing they share. Yeah. And they don't end up sharing the great business insight. They don't share the positive stuff. They don't and so I think you need to keep focused on where you're going to add value for people, and anything that helps you add value, like the honesty that goes like, oh, that's going to bring more trust to my message. Then of course you share that, and anything that detracts from it, maybe you don't lead with that. Now, of course, when questioned or if it comes up, of course, you don't lie about anything. Yeah. I do think it does get weird what the definition, because the definition is different for everybody. Some people don't want to share their background kind of thing. So I'm in my basement, and the reason I have this is because I use, I don't know if you can, but I use there we go. So there's my kids, right? So I use photos in doing virtual keynote presentations, and it's just way easier for me to do this, opposed to creating a background for people. But I did say in the middle of the pandemic at one point that I thought people, that when you do welcome your personal life into your work life, that your roots are showing. And I don't
Your
mean
roots are
these
showing.
roots.
Nice.
It's your roots, the things that keep you grounded and focused and stable. Those things, I think, when you expose your roots, then I think people get to see where your stability comes from and where the important things are in your life. So oftentimes, because my office is in the basement, the kids are home, that door will open and the kids will come in. And I will immediately, even if it's a client, I will prop my kids up on my lap and I wear an earpiece so they can't really hear what's going on anyhow. But I have no issues having my kid join a meeting. Like I have no qualms about it at all. Not everybody else shares that definition, and that's totally cool. I think you just need to stay within the boundaries that you've established for yourself.
Yeah. And so as you were describing that, I was thinking about the hero's journey archetype and how you've probably witnessed this as well, right? There's this successful storyline, right? Where you have someone, their mom dies. Usually it's the Disney story, right? The mother dies, they flounder, they find someone, they're not sure whether to trust them, they have to make a decision, there's a crisis, this whole story, right? And the popular advice, if you're standing up on stage, is be vulnerable and share a story, follow the hero's journey. And I feel like sometimes you said people get obsessed and they fall into this, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but they fall into this pattern of, it's almost like self-deprecation.
Yeah.
Right. Do you think it's related to this common advice of what's your hero's journey story?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think which is, especially from a speaking standpoint, that's the wrong approach. You don't want to be the hero on stage. Like all those stories, I'll tell young speakers, they'll come to me and they'll say, I've got a really unique story that I should share on stage. And I'll always stop them and go, great, just hold on a sec. I want to hear the story. That's so great. Just remember one thing. The guy before you, the person who spoke before you, he went to space. Went to space.
Yeah.
Okay, now, how special is this story you got?
Yeah.
And they're like, I built a business that you're like, right, yeah, not so special.
Yeah.
So special to you, not that you shouldn't be proud of. So I don't speak about church and state on stage. I don't share any of our work. I don't do any of it because I'm not there to be the hero. I'm not saying you should live like me. No, I am here as a curator of information. And my advice is surely it is based on personal experience and what I've gone through, but it also is what the literature has kind of said, this is what works really well. And it's a mix of data and anecdotes and stuff. The only time I share a personal story is when somebody else is the hero in my story. Then it makes it really unique and nobody else can tell that story. But I shouldn't be the hero in that story.
You're making me think about all the stories that I've been telling, and I'm thinking, am I the hero or is someone else the hero? I love telling stories of transformation of my clients, but I'm not making myself the hero for coaching them to that. It's they're the hero for raising their hand for self-improvement or self-development, right? And then doing the work. Yeah. Gotta be careful that that's the message.
Yeah. I mean, I think it all comes down to, like, I won't do it in speeches because it's only an hour and there's a very specific reason I'm there. But if you look at the body of LinkedIn work, well, I post typically, I share stuff 3 times a day. So that's a ton of content. And I know that occasionally I will, share something really vulnerable. I will talk about my mom, the effect my mom had on me. And here's what's crazy is I know that when I do that, the number of shares and likes and all the superficial metric stuff is going to go through the roof. I know that. And most marketers would go, oh, if that's driving your numbers, you should just do more of that. And I go, I don't want to do more. I don't want to do more. I don't want to be that person that's all they share is those vulnerable things. But 5% of the posts, 2% of the posts, sure. I think that then makes you a more complete human being. And do I talk about what we do at Church and State? 7% of the posts or whatever, whatever the numbers are. But I try and make the majority of the stuff somebody else's thoughts that can add value to the person who's reading it.
Well, Ron, you've established a track record on LinkedIn of someone who has valuable information and learning to share with people. You're funny, you're insightful, and so when you show up with something that's vulnerable and really authentic, maybe you're being more transparent about your personal life or your personal experience. That's why you're seeing the numbers. I think you're right. If they were all like that, people would be like, "Who is this guy?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those people who like take pictures of themselves crying, right?
Oh,
Wait.
there was that one of those went viral, but people were basically hating on the guy that did that. I don't know. That was a couple months ago.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
speaking of LinkedIn, before I pressed record, I was thinking there's a good side and a bad side of LinkedIn, right? The good side
Yep.
is I got to meet you.
Yeah.
I mean, I read your posts. I was impressed. I bought your book. I read your book. I invited you to be on my podcast. Thank you, LinkedIn, for that.
Yeah.
There's also a bad side of LinkedIn, and you talk about it in your book. It's called The Pitch Slappers. Can you explain that to the readers? This is we could do the whole interview about this, but
Yeah. Back when I was a creative director at Havas, like just in the kind of the rise of digital and social and stuff, all the pure play digital people were like, oh, just you wait, man. Because I was, creative director on a whack of TV spots. And they'd be like, just you wait, because when digital really comes in, people are only going to get the ads that they want to see for the products that they need when they need them on the platforms that they're on. There'll be no more innocent bystanders. And I was like, well, this will be great. And, it was always supposed to be about personalization and customization, not scale.
yeah.
And what people use digital tools now is just for scale. They're like, if I get 0.02% of the people who click through, then I don't mind sending 2 million messages. I don't mind taking the opportunity to pitch slap somebody every single opportunity I get. If they hate me, I don't care, because 0.2% of them are gonna convert.
What do they call it? Spray and play? Is that what they
spray and pray?
Pray, yeah.
Spray and pray. Yeah. It's not that it doesn't work either.
Right.
I'm not saying it doesn't work. Of course it works. At 0.2%, you're going to get, and people build businesses based on this.
Yep.
But then you got to be that person.
Yeah.
That's the person you become. You become the person whose sales pitch is more important than your authenticity. And of course, we're all there on some level because we're interested in business and we want to take those tools and those conversations and apply them so that we can improve our businesses and grow our businesses. And there's an element of sales in all of us and everything that we do.
Right.
And there's just a way of earning the trust in order to pitch yourself or your ideas, and building up trust that your priority is to add value.
Yeah.
Opposed to just going for the jugular every single time. It's like innocent bystanders. You're like, I'm not even in your target. I don't know if you saw this thing I shared the other day of somebody who reached out and says, like, I have a client, I'm a certified broker. They want to buy a church.
I saw that. I saw that.
What? Like, clearly you're using this for scale.
Yeah.
And I don't feel so special anymore, let alone I'm not an owner of a church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I get why it's so easy. And I get why there's an inner, I fight those demons too, right? I fight the demon of like, man, I really would love to work with that client and I should just pitch slap them.
No, but you wouldn't pitch slap them, right? Because I'm just going to read what the segmentation scheme that you created. There's the groper, the stumble upon, the smoke blower. Gotta love them.
Yeah.
The howdy partner, the Mother Teresa or Father Teresa, the script follower, and Robbie Random. Hey, Andrea, what's your favorite bagel? Oh my God.
Yeah, it's just like random email pitch LinkedIn messages that and you just know when they come in of which segment they're in. The smoke blower is like the person who's like, you are so brilliant.
Yeah. Andrea, I listened to your podcast on fill in the blank, most recent podcast episode, and I really loved it. They don't say anything about it. They didn't listen to it.
No.
Not that it would make a difference anyway, but flattery does not get you everywhere, right?
No, it does not.
So I've gone through phases where I've unconnected. Like, so some of these people that are messaging me on LinkedIn are my connections. I don't know them. And I've gone through phases where if someone requests to connect with me and it says, I'll grow your podcast downloads 10 times, or hey coaches, triple your income by working with me. That's in their headline. So you know what's going to happen, right? It's like a foreshadowing. It's not really even a foreshadowing. But now I accept it, and then I get the message and I just ignore it. But I actually have sent people links to your book and said, read the chapter on pitch slappers.
Oh, well, thank you. Do you know what I do? Because I have a similar rule in that I'm going to give anybody the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, we're all here to learn and share with one another. I get all of that. So right away, I will accept you and give you the benefit of the doubt. But if I suspect something in my acceptance, I will say, so happy to connect. I don't want to be pitched. That's it.
I read that you said that. Yeah, that's a smart one. I've thought about it.
And then when they come back, you're like,
that takes time, Ron. It gives you some kind of satisfaction.
oh no, I have a shortcut.
Oh, you do. You have a shortcut key.
100%. That states that line. I have a quick shortcut.
I love it. Okay. Before we get into the rapid fire questions, I want to ask you about profanity.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it in your book. So far, I think you've only sworn once. I have to decide whether I'm going to bleep it out or keep this as a clean episode.
Yeah.
I've actually interviewed a linguist who teaches a course at a university on rap lyrics, and he's an expert on profanity. And I'm absolutely fascinated by the topic of profanity, to be honest.
Yeah.
What's your take on it? The impact of it, when to do it, when not to do it, any rules you have for yourself or things you wish you'd see or not see other people do?
Yeah. Again, we all have our line, but mine is that in speeches, when it is difficult, the rooms are bigger, right? So you don't know exactly who's there, and you don't want to offend, and you don't want everything else. Yeah. So the line is, so certainly I have a no F-bomb rule in speeches, that's for sure. But I will consciously use the word shit. And I will use it in certain places because I think it actually, it's kind of like, I'm a swearer. This is just who I am. So there's a little bit of authenticity there, but I also think it can make your point better. It can really raise the seriousness of your point. Yeah. And and that's what they're there for, to persuade and people to think like you think.
Well, if you're using it selectively, then it is like punctuation, right?
It's a great way to describe it. It's like punctuation. There's a great video, highly recommend for everybody. It's called Talkin' Funny. It's Jerry Seinfeld, Ricky Gervais, Chris Rock, and Louis C.K. And they just talk about comedy and the ins and outs of it, and the swearing. And they the other three who swear all the time say to Seinfeld, "You don't swear." And he says, no, I mean, I have, but I typically don't because I don't see the funny in it. But he had one joke and he was doing it. And in his natural delivery, there was an F-bomb in the joke. Ooh. And then he consciously said, I'm not going to tell the joke with the F-bomb. And he knew it was just not as funny. Oh. It just wasn't as funny without the punctuation of the F-bomb in it. And he was a little sad at that because he thought that he was always a purist. But it was like, no, sometimes it makes you funnier.
Really interesting. Yeah. I was just having a conversation on the weekend with someone about profanity. You said that you will avoid the F-bomb, but you will say shit.
Yep. I will avoid the F-bomb in speeches.
Yeah. I get that. So one thing that this linguist shared with me that you might also find really interesting is how over the decades, maybe over the centuries, but over the decades, profanity evolves where it may be the most profane terms may be focused on religion, right? Just think about that.
Yeah.
Maybe focused on excrement and filth.
Yeah.
They may be focused on sex. And now the worst words, at least in the English language, are derogatory terms about racial minorities.
Yeah.
And he said, isn't that a beautiful thing about our society where the words that are the most taboo are the racist words? That's actually a good sign for humanity. And I was like, oh, I love that point.
Yeah, it's a great sign of progress.
It is. Yeah. Okay. Can I ask you the 3 rapid fire questions now?
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
Okay. I actually don't know what you're going to say about these. First question. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm usually an extrovert, but I'm an extrovert who needs my introverted time.
Okay.
Is that
You're
a
an
cheat?
ambivert. No, that's not a cheat. You're an ambivert. I ask it that way to be provocative. You're an ambivert, which most of us are. We're right in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What are your communication pet peeves? What do people do that really annoy you?
I bristle at bad grammar.
Such as
like the word seen. Guess who I seen the other day? That drives me. But otherwise, I don't love, like, if you're talking broader communications, like the PowerPoint slide with the 800 points on it, or you probably can't read this at the back of the room because it's 2.5. But anyhow,
let me read it to you.
Yeah. That I don't like. I don't like leaders who read speeches prepared by other people. Especially the reading part. Like there's the presidential paddles thing is just like, that's a really specific skill that not a lot of people can actually do convincingly. So what happens is a lot of leaders, they deliver speeches that are remarks that are prepared by their comms team or their handlers. And those people edit those remarks and create those remarks in written form. And so they write them to be read. They're reading them and they edit them as they read them because it doesn't set, but they're not created to be spoken. And so it's like, yes, I'm reading this, but no audience is going to read this. They're going to hear this from somebody speaking it. Right. And so this perfect language that you've written is beautifully written. Make it, like, dumb it down. Nobody speaks like this. People write like this, but they don't speak like this.
Right. I did a podcasting coaching session at one of my kids' in their class because they had to create a podcast episode for an English assignment.
Nice.
And they were writing their scripts for it. And I said, here's a pointer. Anywhere where you can add a contraction, that's the way we talk. We don't say there is and they are. We say theirs and there. And the teacher goes, oh, that's good. And I said, oh, don't get me started. That's just the beginning, right? Anyway, we don't. That's a great point. We don't read the same way we hear someone speak, or we shouldn't. Yeah.
And we get that all the time because we work on speeches and stuff for CEOs, and it's their handlers that come in and they go, well, I want to see it before they see it. And they'll edit it to sound beautiful. But it's like, no one's going to speak like that.
Yeah. I can imagine where they get there though, right? Because I've had a few executives come to me for what they call media training, and they want to learn how to not go off script. So they are memorizing lines.
Yep.
Even for interviews. Note to all the listeners.
You know the trick I use for that? Yeah, but you know what the trick that I use for that is a conscious repeat of words. Like, and I'll get this a lot where the handlers will say, like, we've used this word too many times in this. And I'm like, no, we consciously did that.
Oh,
it's like, this change is difficult. Change is hard. Change is dynamic. Change is moving forward, because that's how we kind of talk. Right. But they'll want to sub in different words for change. And you're being way too conscious about it. Like, we wouldn't speak like that.
Yep. I love that, Ron. That's back to the original point of being consistent in what you're thinking, what you're doing, what you're saying, and then hitting your audience over the head with the same message. Because, I tell people when we're creating the narrative for their personal brand, you have to say it in your self-introduction. You have to say it again in your next self-introduction. You need to remind people when you see them. And the thing is, it's not repetitive to them because it's not all about you. It's actually all about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, third in this not so rapid fire question is there a podcast or a book that you find yourself recommending lately?
Lately, I mean, someone just asked me this like about business books. And the example I gave, it's an old one, but it holds a special place in my heart because it was the first time I read a business book. I think I was 14 or 15.
Hmm?
And I wasn't a business guy. It was not like
I think we're the same age, Ron. I'm really curious what it is.
I'm 53. So the book, what's the book? So the book was, you may have read this given your background. It's What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School.
Oh, yeah, of course.
By Mark McCormick.
Yeah.
And the line that got me in that book and at first tweaked my interest in branding and marketing and business was the very simple line that Arnold Palmer made more money in his first year of retirement than he ever made playing.
Ah.
And I was like, how is that possible? There's no way this guy made more money in retirement than he made one of the best golfers in the world.
Yeah.
And it was because of partnership deals. And it was the Arnold Palmer brand. That's what did it. And all those things still hold up.
Yeah.
They all hold up.
Yeah.
Mark McCormick has passed away. And that book still, to me, it holds up.
Yeah. Well, I talk to a lot of marketers and they all talk about how originally it was about strategy. So back to your whole motivation for writing the book. They were talking about strategy and identifying consumer insights. And now it's all about data. And I'm like, well, and then what do you do with the data, or how do you read the data based on the strategy and the insights, right?
Yeah.
The foundation.
Yeah, the data, it's just there's so much now, and we're already seeing it with AI where people are just trying to jump the queue to the next thing. Like, what's the next thing? Okay, we're going to start using AI. And we went in saying, yes, of course, you should be using AI. But how about we use it to make us smarter? Like, let's use it to make us smarter. But people are jumping right to how do we just turn to AI and say, write my book for me? That's like, that's maybe eventually, sure, but let's take step one. Like, how do we use it to make us a little bit more efficient? How do we use it to make us smarter so that the insights are better?
Yeah.
Not jumping the queue to just cranking out stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well put. Ron, I have really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything else you want to say to the Talk About Talk listeners about improving their communication skills, or what they're thinking, or what they're doing, or what they're saying?
No. No, I mean, this has been great. I just can't think of anything else that other than thanks for investing the time and listening.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ron.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Ron for so generously sharing his time and his insights with us. If you watched our interview on YouTube, you probably noticed that I was smiling the whole time. Ron definitely has a joie de vivre, and I appreciate his clever sense of humor. If you watched on YouTube, you probably also may have noticed that Ron is wearing a gingham dress shirt. When we first logged into the Zoom call, Ron shared that he frequently wears gingham, be it blue or gray or pink or purple, whatever. Gingham is part of his brand, just like turquoise is part of my brand. Okay, before I get into sharing with you the 3 things that I hope you'll take away from this conversation, I want to acknowledge that perhaps one of the most useful points from this conversation is Ron's suggestion on how to respond to pitch slappers. You know, when you're on LinkedIn and the person who's requesting a connection has their pitch in their headline, the one that says, I'll help you accelerate your sales funnel or gain 1 million followers or whatever. When those people reach out to connect, Ron suggests that you accept the connection with a comment. Happy to connect, not to be pitched. Beautiful. Now, as promised, I'm going to share with you 3 learnings that I hope you'll take away from this conversation. The first point I want to reinforce with you is the title of Ron's book. This is the sequence that he recommends and that you can use as a brand manager creating the brand strategy for your product or your service. First you think, then you do, then you say. There's no need to confuse or overcomplicate things with a voluminous brand strategy document. Ron is also purposeful and disciplined about this sequence. Many people mistakenly focus first on the saying or the communicating. Whether you're managing a product brand, a service brand, or even a personal brand, always start with the thinking. The saying is the last step. For those of you who have taken my personal branding workshops or my boot camps, You might recognize this sequence. I'm also very disciplined and strategic about first doing the creating or the articulating and spending most of our time there, and then moving to the communicating step. Ron and I share this belief of garbage in, garbage out, quality in, quality out. If you spend most of your time on the first step of thinking or creating, the saying or communicating will be a lot easier. The second point I want to reinforce is a line from his book. It's this quote: "It's not a bug, it's a feature." So many of us waste our time trying to hide or change things about ourselves that we see as weaknesses or things that we're holding back. Ron shared the story of the rising executive from the Deep South who was sent to leadership training. And this executive quickly realized that the objective of the training was to erase his Deep South accent. He refused. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Whether it's your accent or your sense of humor, whether it's your leadership style or a personality trait, of course, we need to make sure that these things aren't standing in our way of being a productive leader. But there's often an opportunity to create a narrative around that unique trait and to embrace it as part of your valuable, unique, personal brand. I love that point. The third point I want to reinforce is also a line from Ron's book, and it's this: self-awareness is the purest form of honesty, and honesty is the purest form of authenticity. Ron carefully distinguishes between these terms: self-awareness and its relationship with honesty, and how honesty relates to authenticity. And then in our conversation, we also talked about the distinction between authenticity and transparency. We should be careful with using each of these terms. Transparency doesn't necessarily mean you're sharing every truth about yourself with every person you meet. I love Ron's metaphor of choosing what to wear when you go on a date. If the person you're meeting is an investment banker, chances are you're going to dress differently than if you're dating a tree hugger. Sure, these are extreme examples, but you get the idea. When I'm coaching folks on their personal brand and how to show up as their authentic self, I remind people we are all complicated, sophisticated, smart humans with multiple roles that we play in our lives. We can't share everything with everyone all the time. So instead, we filter what parts of our personal identity we share, depending on the person and depending on the context. As Ron says, you can choose which outfit from your closet to wear, depending on the person and depending on the context. All right, that's it. That's everything for this episode. Thanks again to Ron Tite for sharing his time and his insights with us. If you haven't already read his book, Think, Do, Say, I certainly recommend that you do. There's a link to it in the show notes. And I can't wait to read his next book, The Purpose of Purpose, coming out later this year. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you will refer it to at least one of your friends. I also hope you'll leave a review for us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and talk soon.